The signal came quietly, almost like a whisper traveling through the endless dark. It crossed stars, dust, and frozen worlds before it reached the edge of the Milky Way. No one knew exactly when it began, only that it carried a message full of fear and pleading, a cry for help from a distant world that was dying. Far away, on a small blue planet called Earth, giant listening stations stood under the cold night sky. Their antennas turned slowly, sweeping across space like hands searching for something unseen. For many years, Earth had listened to the stars. Scientists had waited for a sign, but they never truly expected to find one. Then, late one evening, the silence broke. At first, it was just static, a strange rhythm, repeating over and over like someone trying to speak through a storm. The computers translated the sounds into symbols, then the symbols into words, and when the words appeared, the room went silent. It was a distress call, not from humans, but from something else. The message spoke of a world where the air was failing. The oceans were drying and entire cities were sinking beneath red dust. The beings who lived there begged for anyone, anywhere, to help them. Their words were filled with fear, but also with a kind of hope. The hope that someone out there might care enough to answer. For a moment, the scientists didn't know what to do. Humanity had dreamed for centuries of meeting life beyond Earth. Yet when the moment finally came, no one celebrated. The message wasn't a greeting. It was a scream. Earth was no longer the same world it once was. The people of the 22nd century had survived floods, wars, and plagues. They had rebuilt their cities, repaired their air, and learned to live in harmony with their planet again. But those lessons came at a cost. Earth had become tougher, and so had its people. The world had shaped them into survivors. When the call came, the Terran Council, the new body that led humanity's united world, gathered in a chamber that hung above the clouds. The room was quiet as the message played again. The alien voice trembled. The translation came through every speaker in the hall. To any who can hear, our world is ending. We are losing everything, please. If there is mercy among the stars, help us. The words echoed through the air. The council members exchanged uneasy looks. No one had ever heard another intelligent being speak before. The idea that something was out there, suffering, was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. One of the older members spoke softly. We spent centuries looking for life beyond Earth. Now that we've found it, what kind of people will we be if we turn away? There were risks, of course. No one knew where the message came from, or what awaited them if they followed it. It could be a trap. It could be a mistake. Or it could be a chance, the kind of chance humanity had dreamed of since the first telescope pointed to the heavens. While the politicians debated, word of the signal spread. People across the world stopped to listen to the recording that played on every news broadcast. Children asked their parents who was crying in the stars. Farmers in the fields, workers in the cities, pilots in the air, all paused and looked up. For once, humanity felt small again, yet connected by something greater than themselves. Some said it wasn't their problem. Others said it was destiny. Finally, the council voted. The decision was close, but the answer was yes. Earth would respond. Humanity would not stay silent. Ships were prepared in the orbital docks that circled the planet like silver rings. They were massive, slow vessels built not for war but for endurance. Their hulls were thick, their engines steady, and their crews chosen from across every nation. These were the Terrans, explorers, scientists, doctors, and engineers, all trained to survive anywhere, even on worlds that tried to kill them. When the first fleet prepared to launch, crowds gathered across the continents to watch. On mountain peaks, beaches, and rooftops, people looked up at the night sky as the countdown began. The air shook with thunder. Flames burst from the engines, and the ships rose like new stars into the heavens. For many, it felt like history repeating, humans leaving Earth again, not to conquer but to help. As the fleet climbed higher, Earth faded into a blue sphere below. The astronauts stared in silence, feeling both pride and fear. Somewhere out there, far beyond their home, someone needed them, and they were the only ones answering. Weeks passed as the ships crossed empty space. The message repeated constantly in their radios, guiding them toward a dying sun. Outside the windows, stars glimmered like frozen tears. Inside, people worked tirelessly, checking life support, running simulations, preparing for what they might find. The mission wasn't easy. Supplies were limited, and the unknown waited ahead like a shadow. Yet no one gave up. There was a strange calm among them, the kind that comes when people know they are part of something far bigger than themselves. Finally, after long weeks of travel, the fleet entered the edge of the alien system. What they saw made every heart stop. The planet was broken. From orbit, the world looked sick. Massive cracks cut through its surface like open wounds. Storms spun endlessly across continents. The oceans were dark and shrinking. Even the light from the planet's sun looked dim and tired. But scattered across the land were signs of life. Glowing cities barely holding on, their energy fading like candles in the wind. The human commander gave a single order: prepare to descend. As the first landing ship entered the atmosphere, fire streaked across its sides. The winds were violent and the clouds were thick with acid dust. But the crew stayed calm. They had landed in worse places. Their own planet had once been just as harsh. When they finally broke through the clouds, the view below stunned them. Great towers of glass and crystal leaned against each other, some shattered, some still glowing faintly. Rivers of molten metal ran between them. In the distance they could see figures, tall, thin beings moving slowly, as if each step cost them strength. The landing craft touched down on a flat plain, its engines kicking up dust and ash. For a long moment no one moved. Then the doors opened, and the first humans stepped out. The ground crumbled beneath their boots. The air hissed against their suits. Every sound was muffled except the steady beating of their hearts. They carried supplies and food, water, machines, and most importantly, a flag not of any single country, but of Earth itself. It wasn't a symbol of power, but of presence. A promise. At first, the aliens didn't approach. They watched from a distance, their large eyes full of fear and confusion. They had expected monsters or saviors. They didn't know which. But when one of them finally walked forward and reached out a trembling hand, a human stepped closer, removed a glove, and gently took it. For the first time in history, two worlds met. Not with weapons, but with understanding. The translation devices crackled. The alien spoke, voice weak but clear. "You came." The human nodded. "You called." Those two words carried more meaning than any speech could. They bridged the gap between species, between worlds, between fear and hope. That night, under a sickly red sky, humans set up shelters and shared water. The aliens watched in silence as the newcomers worked through the night without rest. They built wind filters, repaired oxygen processors, and planted devices to clean the air. Every action was small, but together they were a spark of survival. In orbit, the rest of the Terran fleet watched the readings come in. The atmosphere was toxic, the gravity heavy, the radiation high. All the things that would kill most species. But the humans adapted. They always did. The aliens couldn't believe it. These creatures from a so-called death world walked through storms that melted metal, yet still smiled, still helped, and somewhere deep in the galaxy, where alien councils whispered and worried, a new rumor began to spread, that the Terrans had answered a call no one else dared to face. Back on Earth, people stayed awake through the night, watching the images sent from the mission. Children pointed at the screens, amazed by the tall, glowing figures and the brave humans standing beside them. For the first time in centuries, the world felt united again, not by fear, not by politics, but by kindness. The signal that had begun as a cry for help became something more. It became a story of strangers in the dark, reaching across the stars to hold each other up. And as the alien sun rose on that broken world, lighting the humans' helmets in gold, one thing became clear: the galaxy would never see Earth the same way again. Because when no one else answered, the Terrans did. Far from the dying planet where the Terrans had just landed, the Galactic Council gathered in their vast chamber. The room floated among the stars, built of shining crystal and metal so clear it reflected the colors of entire nebulae. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in silence, their bodies glowing, shimmering, or pulsing with strange energy. It was a meeting of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, yet tonight they were afraid. On the center screen, a hologram replayed the same message over and over, the distress call from the doomed world. Every time the words echoed, many of them turned their eyes away. No one wanted to look at the pain of another species because, deep inside, they knew what it meant. To send a rescue would risk lives. It would risk ships. It might even risk war. For years, the Council had grown comfortable in their safety. Their planets were calm. Their laws were perfect. Their people didn't fight or starve anymore. They believed they had evolved beyond danger. But now this message, this desperate cry, reminded them that not every world was as lucky as theirs. One voice finally broke the silence. It came from a creature whose skin shimmered like liquid silver. "We cannot send anyone," it said softly. "That system is unstable. The sun is dying. The storms there can tear ships apart. No one can survive it." Another council member, taller with wings that looked like folded glass, added, "Even if they survive the trip, the planet is lost. Helping them would only delay the inevitable." One by one, they agreed. The discussion became an exchange of excuses, each one sounding logical, reasonable, safe. Then, near the edge of the chamber, a young voice spoke, trembling, but firm. "What about the humans?" The room went completely silent. The counselors turned toward the small figure who had spoken. It belonged to an envoy from a younger world, one that still believed in courage. "Humans?" Someone repeated, their tone half disbelief, half amusement. The envoy nodded. "They live on a death world, a planet that changes, burns, freezes, and shakes all the time. Their storms can destroy cities. Their oceans rise and fall. Their beasts can kill in moments. Yet they survive. Every time. If anyone can endure the chaos of that dying planet, it's them." The chamber filled with whispers. Some of the older species exchanged uneasy glances. The word Terrans was spoken in low voices like a warning. For centuries, the galaxy had known of humans, though most had never met one. Stories about them traveled faster than light. Some said they were too wild, too emotional, too dangerous. Others said they were protectors, the kind who would fight to the last breath for anyone they called a friend. But one thing everyone agreed on: humans were unpredictable. And unpredictable things frightened the Council. A large insect-like being clicked its mandibles. "They are primitive," it hissed. "Barely past their own wars. We cannot trust them with a mission of mercy." Another replied, "They are survivors. Perhaps that is what's needed." The debate went on for hours. Logic fought against fear. Pride battled with guilt. Finally, the Council's oldest member, a creature older than any human civilization, raised a single hand. The room fell quiet again. "Let them go," it said. "If the humans wish to answer, let them. None of us will risk our fleets. But if they survive, if they succeed, then perhaps the galaxy still has hope." The decision was made. The message was sent toward Earth. An invitation, or perhaps a challenge. The Council expected humanity to decline. They believed Terrans would calculate the danger and refuse. But they didn't know humans as well as they thought. On Earth, the message arrived at the Terran Command Center, a tall, glass tower overlooking what had once been a wasteland, now turned green again through decades of human effort. The officials gathered in a circular hall, surrounded by screens showing the alien transmission. The words were simple. "The Galactic Council has received your planet's registration as a capable explorer species. A distress call has been identified in Sector Varnus 12. Assistance required. All other species have declined. You may respond at your own risk." For a long time, no one spoke. The air was heavy with quiet awe. Humanity had dreamed of joining the galactic community for centuries, but this was not the welcome they imagined. The Council wasn't offering friendship. They were offering a test, one too dangerous for themselves. A few officers exchanged nervous looks. "So they're sending us into a dying system," one muttered. "They're asking us to clean up what they don't want to touch." Another voice spoke, calm but determined. "They're asking for help. That's all that matters." Across the room, people nodded. Earth had been through disasters far worse. Once the planet itself had turned against them. Storms, floods, famine. But humans had rebuilt. They had learned to adapt, to help each other even when everything seemed lost. Helping strangers, even aliens, wasn't madness to them. It was purpose. That evening, the announcement went global. Every screen, every feed, every radio carried the message. Humanity had been asked to answer a call for help across the stars. Reactions poured in from everywhere. Some were fearful. Some were proud. Some said it was destiny. But among the ordinary people, the farmers, the teachers, the builders, there was a quiet understanding. They knew what it felt like to need help and find none. They knew what it meant to suffer and survive anyway. So they supported the mission. Factories worked day and night to prepare supplies. Engineers checked every ship twice. Medics trained for alien biology using only rough data from the Council. It didn't matter that they didn't know what they'd face and they would go anyway. When launch day came, the skies above Earth were clear and golden. Thousands gathered on the ground, waving banners of blue and white, the colors of the planet itself. Families hugged their loved ones, whispering words of hope. Some cried quietly, not out of fear but pride. The ships stood ready, tall as mountains, gleaming like stars. Their hulls carried the insignia of a single world united under one purpose. As the engines began to roar, a deep vibration rolled through the ground. Birds flew into the air, children shouted and pointed at the sky, and when the countdown reached 0, the fleet rose. Fire trailed behind them, painting streaks of light across the atmosphere. The crowd erupted into cheers that could be heard for miles. High above, the pilots looked down through their viewports. Earth glowed below them, beautiful, fragile, full of memories. One of them whispered, "We're coming back." We always do. As the planet grew smaller, the stars grew brighter. Ahead of them lay a vast unknown, the same darkness that had frightened every species before. But for humans, that darkness had always been home. They were born under storms, shaped by struggle and guided by curiosity. Fear was familiar, but so was courage. Days turned into weeks as the Terran fleet moved deeper into the sector. They passed through asteroid fields and nebulae glowing in strange colors. The void around them was quiet. Too quiet. Sometimes they picked up faint echoes of old transmissions, the kind that drifted through space for decades. It made them realize how empty the galaxy could feel. Yet every time they looked out the windows, they remembered why they were there. Somewhere ahead, lives were fading. A world was waiting for someone to care. Meanwhile, back in the council chamber, news of Earth's decision spread. Some laughed. Some scoffed. They actually said yes, one delegate asked. They're insane, but others looked thoughtful. Maybe they're not insane, another said quietly. Maybe they just remember something we've forgotten. Days later, when the first human ship entered the dying system, the council received the signal. The image was grainy, filled with static, but clear enough. A fleet of Terran ships descending through a storm-filled sky, engines blazing against the red clouds. The oldest member of the council watched the recording for a long time. No one spoke. Then finally the old one said, "They went where none of us dared." And for the first time in many years, a strange silence filled the chamber, not of fear, but of respect. In the void between stars, humanity continued onward. Inside their ships, people shared stories to pass the time, stories of home, of the earth that raised them. Some talked about the oceans, others about the snow, others about the warmth of sunlight after a storm. Each story reminded them of what they were fighting for, not victory but connection. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They were simply humans, doing what humans had always done, helping when no one else would. And though they didn't know it yet, their choice to answer that single message would change the entire galaxy forever. Because while others hesitated, the Terrans moved forward, not for glory, not for reward, but because they understood one simple truth. When someone cries out for help, you don't look away. You go. The message had been received. The decision had been made. Now it was time for Earth to act. For many years, humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars, not just to explore, but to connect. They had sent probes, built colonies on nearby planets, and established a small but proud presence in the galaxy. Yet even after all their progress, most alien civilizations still looked down on them as reckless newcomers, creatures from a death world who didn't know their limits. But the humans didn't care about reputation. They cared about purpose, and this mission gave them one. When the signal of distress reached Earth, the Terran command began to prepare faster than anyone expected. Across continents, factories came alive. Workers returned to the hangars and engineers checked every part of the ships with quiet focus. No one complained about the long hours or the danger ahead. They knew why they were doing it. In cities filled with bright towers and clean air, people gathered to watch the news. The screens showed the same headline: Earth responds to alien call for help. Every person watching felt something stir inside. Pride, fear, and hope all mixed together. Some whispered, "What if they don't come back?" Others answered softly, "They will. They're Terrans. The fleet chosen for the mission wasn't the biggest Earth had. It wasn't made of warships or soldiers. These were different kinds of vessels: rescue ships, science cruisers, medical carriers, and engineering transports. Each one carried hundreds of volunteers, people from every walk of life: doctors, builders, teachers, scientists, and explorers. They were trained for danger, but their hearts were focused on one goal: to help a world they'd never seen, a people they'd never met. In the command bay of the lead ship, screens glowed with maps of stars and routes through unknown space. The crew worked quietly, double-checking oxygen levels, power readings, and data received from the Galactic Council. The location they were heading to was thousands of light-years away, a system named Varnus 12. The data showed unstable magnetic storms, volcanic activity, and radiation spikes. It was a dying world, one most species wouldn't dare approach. But humans were different. Danger was something they understood. Before departure, a final broadcast was sent to the entire planet. A representative of the Terran people stood before the cameras. No fancy uniform, no rehearsed lines, just honest words. They asked for help and we heard them. We don't know what waits for us out there, but when someone is in need, we don't turn away. This is who we are. This is what Earth stands for. The message spread across every continent. People stopped whatever they were doing to listen. For a moment, all of humanity shared the same heartbeat. When the day of launch came, the sky above the Terran spaceport was a deep, endless blue. The giant ships stood ready, sleek and strong, their surfaces covered in white and silver plates that shimmered in the sunlight. From the viewing decks, families watched with quiet emotion. Some held hands. Others waved small flags marked with the Earth emblem. A blue sphere surrounded by stars. Inside the ships, the crews prepared. Each person had a photo of their loved ones, taped somewhere near their seat. Some prayed in silence. Others just closed their eyes, listening to the soft hum of the engines, feeling the vibration through their boots. It wasn't fear that filled the air. It was determination. When the countdown began, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. 10, 9, 8. The sound of engines grew louder, deep and powerful, echoing through valleys and oceans. 3, 2, 1. The fleet rose. Flames blazed beneath them, and a roar filled the air as the ships climbed higher and higher. The ground shook and people cheered with tears in their eyes. They were watching history. Not a war, not a conquest, but an act of courage born from compassion. In the blackness of space, the Earth slowly faded behind them. The blue oceans, the white clouds, the green continents, all became small and distant like a fragile memory. The crew members stared for a long moment before turning back to their tasks. Home was beautiful, but now they had a mission that went beyond it. Days turned into weeks. The Terran fleet traveled through silent darkness, crossing systems no one had charted before. Stars passed by like tiny diamonds. Inside the ships, time moved differently. Long hours of calm work, short moments of laughter, and quiet nights filled with thought. People talked to each other about simple things: their families, their favorite foods, the things they missed from Earth. Those little conversations kept them human, even when surrounded by the cold vacuum of space. Occasionally, they'd pick up faint signals, old transmissions drifting through the void. Some were just static, others fragments of alien speech faded by time. But one signal never stopped, the original distress call. It played on repeat in the background, a reminder of why they were there. Please help us. Our world is dying. Every time the voice echoed through the speakers, the crew grew more focused. They worked harder, slept less. The engineers fine-tuned their landing systems. The medics prepared for unknown biology, and the pilots studied every piece of data about the planet's dangerous storms. One evening, the stars outside shifted into streaks of light, the final jump before arrival. The captain gave the signal. Everyone fastened their harnesses. Lights dimmed, engines roared, and space itself seemed to twist around them. When the fleet dropped out of jump space, an eerie silence filled the cabins. The dying world lay before them. It was nothing like they had imagined. The planet's color was wrong, not blue, not green, but a dull, smoky red. Great cracks stretched across its surface, glowing faintly with molten light. Thick storms of ash and lightning swirled through the atmosphere. Even from orbit, they could see entire cities buried in dust. their faint lights flickering like candles ready to go out. The first readings came in. Oxygen unstable, surface temperature extreme, radiation levels high. It was a world that should have been lifeless. But it wasn't. Scattered across the continents were signs of movement, heat signatures weak but present. The aliens were still alive. The communication officers tried to send a message through the storms, but interference was heavy. Finally, a single response broke through the static. A faint, trembling voice. We see your ships. Are you real?" The human crew looked at each other. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the captain replied softly but clearly, "We're real, and we came to help." The signal was silent for a few seconds, then the voice returned, full of disbelief. No one else came. The humans didn't answer. They didn't need to. Landing preparations began immediately. The fleet split into smaller groups, each targeting a different region where survivors had been detected. The ships entered the atmosphere, engines glowing against the burning clouds. The descent was rough. Turbulence shook every cabin and lightning flashed outside like white fire. But the pilots held steady. They had trained for worse. When the first Terran ship touched down, its landing gear sank slightly into the soft red dust. The wind howled, carrying the sound of cracking earth. The air was toxic. No one could step outside without a suit. Yet beyond the storm, they could see faint figures approaching, walking slowly, almost floating. The crew's hearts pounded. This was it, the first true contact. The beings came closer, their shapes clearer now. Tall, thin, glowing faintly with soft light beneath transparent skin. Their eyes were large and gentle, filled with exhaustion and fear. They looked fragile, as if a single breath could break them. For a few moments, no one moved. The aliens just stared at the massive human ship, its metal surface shining through the storm. Then one of them raised a trembling hand, a gesture that spoke louder than words. Hope. The humans stepped forward. Their suits hissed as they adjusted pressure. One of them lifted a small pack of supplies and gently set it down on the ground between them. The alien tilted its head, uncertain. Then it reached out, and the moment its fingers touched the container, a soft light glowed between both species. It wasn't just a meeting. It was the beginning of understanding. As the day faded, the humans built the first shelters and powered up the filtration units. The air began to clear slowly. The aliens watched in silence as these strange beings from a distant planet worked tirelessly through the night. They didn't rest. They didn't stop. Every movement showed a simple truth. They were there to help no matter what. In orbit, the rest of the Terran fleet reported progress. Dozens of small camps had been established. Medical units were treating the weak. Energy cores were being stabilized. Humanity had come not as conquerors, but as healers. Back on Earth, people watched the live feed with tears in their eyes. They saw their own kind standing beneath red skies, surrounded by strangers, and helping them survive. It was a moment no one would forget. The aliens had expected monsters. Instead, they found people, and the galaxy, watching from afar, began to whisper once more about the humans, the Terrans, who went where no one else dared to go, and turned despair into hope. Because sometimes real strength isn't in weapons or power. It's in compassion, the kind that crosses worlds. The first night on that broken world was long and restless. The red storms roared in the distance, throwing waves of dust into the air. The ground shook every few hours like the planet itself was sighing from pain. Yet through that chaos, tiny lights began to appear, human-built shelters glowing softly against the darkness. Inside one of those shelters, the air was warm and filled with quiet voices. The humans were tired, their suits covered in dust, but none of them slept. They worked in shifts, repairing filters, checking oxygen levels, and studying the environment. Outside, the aliens watched silently. They had never seen such beings before, heavy-bodied, covered in layers of armor, breathing through masks, yet moving with purpose and care. To the aliens, these visitors from Earth looked like giants. Their world had been calm before the disaster. No storms, no cold, no hunger. They had never known struggle. But now, as they watched humans working tirelessly through the night, something inside them began to shift. The beings who had come from the death world were not what they expected. They weren't loud, cruel, or violent. They were focused, patient, and calm, even when the wind screamed outside. At sunrise, the alien elders approached the human camp. Their steps were slow and hesitant. The humans stopped their work and turned. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then one of the aliens lifted its hand and placed it over its chest, their gesture of respect. A human mirrored the movement, removing a glove and pressing a hand over their heart. A translator drone floated between them, trying to catch the faint sounds. The alien's voice was weak but clear. "You came from the blue world, why?" The human replied softly, "Because you asked for help." Those few words carried more meaning than any grand speech. The alien looked down as if not believing what it heard. "No one else answered," it whispered. "We know," said the human. "But we did." The aliens guided the humans through what was left of their cities. Towers of crystal and stone leaned like broken trees. Streets were cracked, filled with dust and silence. Once this world had been bright and full of life. Now it looked like an empty shadow. The few survivors who remained were thin, pale, and trembling. The air was poisonous for them now. Their lungs burned with every breath, but they refused to leave. It was their home. The humans didn't try to change that. They simply started helping. Teams set up energy stabilizers around the dying sun's orbit to slow its radiation storms. Others built portable filters that turned the toxic air into breathable oxygen. Engineers worked with their alien counterparts, showing them how to repair broken systems using simple methods. Doctors treated the sick with medicines they'd adapted for alien biology in just a few hours. Everywhere they went, the aliens followed, watching in quiet awe. They had seen advanced species before, ones with technology that could move mountains, but none who worked with their own hands, shoulder to shoulder in the dirt and smoke. On the third day, the first child of the alien species approached a group of humans. The small figure carried a piece of broken crystal, a fragment of their home. It offered it to a human as a gift. The human smiled beneath the visor and took it gently, holding it as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. The child's eyes lit up. For the first time in months, laughter echoed across that world. It was a small, simple sound, but it meant hope was alive again. Word spread fast among the survivors. The Terrans, and that's what they called the humans now, had come to help, not to take. Soon more aliens began coming out of hiding, bringing whatever tools or knowledge they still had left. Together they worked side by side, repairing power systems, building clean shelters, and gathering food from what little the planet could still offer. Every day was a battle, not against enemies, but against time. The planet's core was unstable. Earthquakes shook the ground more often. Storms grew harsher. But still, the Terrans stayed. They didn't flinch when the skies turned dark or when the air turned cold. They built walls against the wind, repaired fallen towers, and never stopped smiling when the aliens thanked them. To the humans, hardship was familiar. To the aliens, it was new. But watching the Terrans endure taught them something powerful. Strength doesn't always come from power. Sometimes it comes from patience. At night, both species gathered around glowing heaters, sharing stories through translators. The aliens spoke about how peaceful their world once was, how their people lived in harmony with their sun, believing it would shine forever. When the sun began to fail, they didn't know how to fight back. They had never needed to. They watched helplessly as everything they loved slowly faded. The humans listened silently. They didn't interrupt. When the story ended, one of them simply said, "You didn't fail. The universe changes. The strong don't ignore it. They adapt." Those words stayed with the aliens. They began to help more actively, learning, repairing, and even venturing into dangerous zones with the humans. For the first time in generations, they felt something stronger than fear. They felt courage. Meanwhile, in orbit above, the Terran command ships continued to send updates back to Earth. Every message carried the same tone: progress, hope, unity. And on Earth, people stayed awake late into the night just to hear those updates. The whole planet felt connected to that faraway world, cheering for its recovery like it was their own. But not everyone in the galaxy shared that hope. From afar, the Galactic Council watched in silence. They received reports that the humans had reached the dying planet and were stabilizing parts of its environment. Some were surprised. Others were uneasy. One council member muttered, "Impossible. That world cannot be saved." Another replied quietly, "Then perhaps it's not the world they're saving. It's something else." On the ground, the aliens began to see the Terrans differently. They weren't just rescuers now. They were teachers. Their technology wasn't the most advanced, but it worked. Their ideas were simple yet powerful. They taught the aliens how to filter water, store energy, and rebuild homes using local materials. They didn't demand anything in return, only cooperation. When the aliens tried to thank them, the humans would always say the same thing: "You would do the same for us." The aliens never answered out loud, but deep down they knew. Maybe they wouldn't have, at least not before. But now, after seeing what humans could do, they wanted to become better too. Weeks passed. The sky above the planet began to clear. The storms weakened slightly, enough for sunlight to break through the red haze. It wasn't much, but when the light touched the rebuilt shelters, everyone stopped and looked up. The aliens' transparent skin shimmered softly in the warmth. Some began to cry, tears of relief, not sorrow. One of them turned to a human and said, "Your world must be strong to create people like you." The human smiled gently. "No," they replied. "Our world is harsh. That's why we learn to survive." It was in that moment the aliens truly understood who the Terrans were. They weren't the strongest in the galaxy, nor the most intelligent. They were something rarer, beings who turned pain into strength, fear into kindness, and struggle into empathy. That night, when the Terrans returned to their camp, they found something unexpected. The aliens had built a small monument using broken pieces of their cities, a circle of shining crystal, glowing softly under the faint starlight. In its center, they had placed a symbol, the Earth emblem, copied perfectly from the humans' ships. One alien spoke for all of them. "You gave us back our light," they said. "We will not forget." The humans didn't know what to say. They simply bowed their heads. In the following days, more progress was made. The oxygen levels began to rise. Crops started to grow again under the restabilized atmosphere. The Terrans set up a long-term generator system that would last for decades. Soon the planet wasn't dying anymore, and it was healing. Back on Earth, when the final transmission arrived, the entire world celebrated. The footage showed humans and aliens standing side by side, smiling as the sun rose over a mended horizon. The voice from the transmission was calm and proud. "Mission success. They will live. The galaxy will hear their song again." And somewhere deep in space, the Galactic Council received the same message. The chamber fell silent as the recording played. Terrans walking through red dust, helping hands reaching out, light returning to a dying sky. No one spoke for a long time. Then finally, one council member whispered almost to themselves. They came from the death world, and they brought life. That day, the galaxy learned something new about humanity. They were not just survivors. They were healers, and their strength came not from power but from heart. The alien world was slowly changing. What had once been a place of fear and silence was now filled with the quiet hum of machines, the murmur of conversations, and the sound of hope taking root. The humans, known to the aliens now as Terrans, moved tirelessly through the settlements. They were everywhere, repairing broken streets, setting up energy grids, teaching the aliens how to grow crops in the poisoned soil, and calming the frightened who had watched their world collapse. The aliens had watched many species come and go over centuries. Some came seeking resources, some came to claim power, and others observed from afar, never touching the lives they studied. None had ever seen anything like these Terrans. They were strange creatures, heavy-bodied, fragile in appearance, yet full of courage and determination. Even the smallest human moved as if the storms outside meant nothing, as if no wind, no dust, no broken ground could slow them down. The alien elders began to whisper among themselves. "They are not like any we have seen before," said one, its translucent fingers tracing a pattern in the air. "They do not fear. They do not take. They give even when it is dangerous," another nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is why our ancestors sent the message into space. Perhaps someone like them was meant to answer." The Terrans had split into teams, each with a mission. Some focused on repairing the energy cores of the city, which had been failing for decades. Others worked on rebuilding shelters and teaching the alien population how to purify water and grow food in soil that had long been thought useless. The children of the alien world began to follow them, learning to carry tools, tend small plants, and help wherever they could. The adults, once afraid, began to mimic the humans' work ethic, slowly regaining a sense of control over their lives. One day, a large storm swept across the horizon. Red clouds thickened, lightning crackled, and the wind roared like a living thing. Many species would have hidden. Many species would have fled. But the Terrans faced the storm head-on. They anchored the shelters, repaired broken energy lines, and guided the aliens to safe zones. The aliens watched from the hills, awe filling their senses. They whispered among themselves. "How can creatures from a world like that survive storms?" They asked. "How can they move as if nothing matters?" The truth, as the humans understood, was simple. Their planet, Earth, had always tested them. Its earthquakes, its floods, its storms, its winters. These were lessons they carried into every world. Hardship was not an enemy. It was a teacher, and it had taught them to endure. By the third week, a remarkable transformation began. The air began to clear slightly as filtration systems powered by human technology took effect. Water from distant underground reservoirs, once too contaminated to use, became clean enough for drinking. The energy grid stabilized, allowing lights to shine in the broken cities for the first time in decades. And everywhere the aliens began to smile again, softly. At first, then openly, freely. One evening, as the twin suns of the alien world began to set behind mountains of red stone, the humans gathered with a group of alien children. The kids had never known peace. They had never felt the simple joy of playing outside without fear of storms or poison. The humans took them by the hand, showing them how to build small machines that could move with the wind, how to plant seeds in prepared soil, and how to create little games using objects from their surroundings. The children laughed. Their laughter echoed across the empty streets, bouncing off the crumbled towers, carrying hope into places that had known only despair. The humans watched quietly, smiling beneath their helmets, knowing this moment, simple, small human, was as important as any energy grid or medical treatment. The aliens began to tell stories of the past. They spoke of their ancestors who had built cities that touched the sky, of music that could calm storms, and of festivals that once celebrated the light of their twin suns. The humans listened, absorbing every word. They didn't judge or mock. They simply remembered that all civilizations had history, struggles, and beauty, and that understanding was the first step to helping. Days turned into weeks. The Terrans began teaching the aliens not just survival, but resilience. They showed them how to predict storms using simple instruments, how to store food for long periods, and how to repair structures in ways that would survive earthquakes. The aliens, once weak and fearful, began to work alongside them, developing their own methods inspired by human ingenuity. The alien elders, once hesitant, finally spoke openly. "You have done what no other species could," said one, voice filled with wonder. "You do not take. You do not conquer. You create, you save." The humans shook their heads. "We did not come to be heroes," one replied. "We came because you called, and because we know what it is to be in need." The council of alien leaders watched silently as humans and aliens worked side by side. They had believed in hierarchy, in strict control, in waiting for perfection, and yet here, on a broken world, they had seen something different. Humanity's strength was not in power, not in control, but in compassion. That quiet willingness to risk hardship for others, that was something no council, no weapon, no law could teach. As the sun rose one morning, the transformation became undeniable. The air smelled clean. Small green sprouts pushed through the red soil. Children ran freely. Families began to rebuild homes not just as shelters but as places for life to return. The humans, exhausted but determined, moved from one task to another, never slowing, never tiring. And still they did not seek reward. They did not ask for recognition. They simply worked. One of the alien children, now confident enough to walk alone among the humans, held a small flag, a copy of the Earth emblem painted in bright colors. It waved in the wind, fluttering like a symbol of connection between two very different worlds. The child looked at the humans and whispered, "Thank you." The humans nodded, gently. "Keep helping. This world is yours too." Word of the humans' actions began to spread beyond this planet. Distant observers in the galaxy, those who had watched the Terrans arrive with skepticism, sent reports to their home worlds. They were amazed. How can beings from a primitive planet accomplish what we feared? Some asked. "They are not the destroyers we expected. They are..." different. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council, which had once debated sending anyone at all, received constant updates. They could see the reports of repairs, of hope, of life returning. Some council members were proud. Some were unsettled. All were quiet. For the first time, they realized that power and technology were not always the ultimate measure of a species. Sometimes the measure was heart. The humans themselves said little about their accomplishments. They were too busy ensuring that the aliens could survive on their own. They trained, they advised, they guided, not to create dependence but to create independence. Slowly, the alien world regained stability. Slowly, its people regained confidence. Then came a moment that would be remembered for generations. A young alien, fully healed and confident, approached the Terran leader. "You have given us more than survival," they said. "You have given us hope. And hope is stronger than any storm." The Terran smiled. "That was always yours to hold. We only reminded you that it existed." From above, the Terran ships remained in orbit, monitoring progress, ready to intervene if needed. Yet more and more they found they were not needed in the way they had feared. The aliens were learning, adapting and rebuilding, guided by humans' example, inspired by humans' determination. The alien cities began to glow again, faintly at first, then more brightly. Streets were cleared, towers repaired, and the first festivals in decades were held under the twin suns. Music returned, faint and trembling, but alive. The humans watched from the outskirts, letting the aliens celebrate. They had done their work, not as rulers, not as conquerors, but as teachers, helpers, and friends. And in that quiet, the galaxy began to change its opinion about humanity. The Terrans were no longer just survivors from a death world. They were beings of courage and kindness, willing to cross impossible distances, face impossible dangers, and give life to a world that had almost lost it all. The Galactic Council could no longer call them unpredictable or reckless. They were proof that compassion could be stronger than fear, that action could be braver than words, and that the heart could be mightier than any weapon. And somewhere on Earth, the people watching the live transmissions of the alien world smiled, knowing their kind had done something extraordinary, not for glory, not for fame, but because helping was who they were. The aliens would never forget the Terrans. They would tell their children and their children's children about the beings from the blue world who walked into storms, repaired a dying planet, and gave them hope when all else had failed. The Terrans, in turn, would carry the lessons of this world with them, that courage is quiet, that compassion is unstoppable, and that sometimes the most important mission is simply to answer a call for help. The alien world had changed. What had once been a planet of despair and silence now hummed with life. The red skies still glowed with the scars of its past, but beneath them, growth and hope flourished. Small green shoots pushed through the soil. Families walked freely in streets once cracked and broken. Children laughed and played, no longer afraid of storms or poisonous air. And all of this was possible because humans, Terrans, had come and refused to leave until life returned. The final weeks of the Terrans' mission were filled with quiet victories. They had taught the aliens how to predict the storms that had once destroyed entire cities. They had repaired energy cores to stabilize the planet's atmosphere. They had built systems to purify water, to store food, and to protect life from the planet's unstable surface. Most importantly, they had restored confidence. The alien people no longer trembled when the wind blew. They no longer hesitated to step outside. They had seen what courage looked like, and now they carried it themselves. The Terrans had taught them not only to survive, but to hope. Every morning, the humans and aliens would gather in the central square of the largest settlement. Humans shared lessons, repaired tools, or worked on new structures. Aliens worked alongside them, learning the methods, adding their creativity, and gradually taking over responsibilities. The humans began stepping back, letting the aliens lead their own projects while remaining close to provide guidance. It was a delicate balance. Too much help could make the aliens dependent. Too little could risk failure. But the Terrans had learned over centuries that people, even entire species, could rise when given both tools and trust. One day, a large ceremony was planned to celebrate the stabilization of the planet. The aliens worked tirelessly to prepare decorations, glowing crystals, floating lights, and simple structures built from recovered debris. The humans helped with logistics, ensuring safety systems worked and energy was stable. It was a festival unlike any the alien world had seen in decades. When the day arrived, the twin suns rose with a rare brilliance piercing through the lingering red haze. The humans and aliens gathered in the central square. The children, now confident and unafraid, ran freely around the area, waving small flags they had painted with symbols representing both species. Adults and elders stood nearby, their transparent skins shimmering in the sunlight. The leader of the alien elders stepped forward. Their voice, soft but clear, filled the gathering. For centuries, we have lived in fear of our dying world. We believed no help would come. We believed our hope was gone. But the Terrans came, not as conquerors, not as observers, but as friends. They walked into our storms. They faced the dangers that we could not. They gave us knowledge, courage, and life itself. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the wind seemed to pause in respect. The humans remained quiet, standing together as they always had. They did not seek praise. They did not need it. Their purpose had always been simple: answer the call for help. One human finally spoke, stepping forward with a calm voice. "We did not come here for glory," they said. "We came because you needed help, and because we have known what it is to survive when all hope seems lost. Your strength was always inside you. We only reminded you that it existed." The alien crowd erupted in soft murmurs of awe. Children clutched the humans' hands. Elders bowed slightly. And somewhere in the distance, the sound of distant waterfalls revived by Terran technology added a natural harmony to the scene. As the festival continued, the humans began teaching the aliens how to celebrate their achievements. Music returned, faint at first, then stronger, more confident. The aliens had forgotten rhythm, harmony, and song. But guided by the humans' encouragement, they began to play, to sing, to dance, filling the square with sound and motion for the first time in generations. The Terrans watched quietly, smiling beneath their helmets. They didn't join immediately. Their joy was in seeing life return, not in taking the spotlight. And slowly, one by one, some humans joined the dancing, laughing alongside the aliens. The planet itself seemed to exhale, a deep rumbling sound that felt like gratitude. In the days that followed, the Terrans prepared to depart. Their mission was almost complete. The planet could sustain itself again. The aliens were strong and capable, and hope was no longer a fragile concept. Yet leaving was difficult. After weeks of living side by side, teaching, learning, and laughing, bonds had formed. Humans had shared meals, stories, and even quiet moments under the twin suns with their alien friends. The alien elders approached the humans one last time. They presented gifts, not gold, not jewels, but creations from their world. A crystalline water sculpture that reflected sunlight like a rainbow, a small device that could produce warmth in cold zones, and a tiny flag painted with symbols representing the unity between species. Each gift was carefully wrapped, given with a bow of respect and gratitude. "We will never forget you," said one elder, their voice trembling. "You have given us more than survival. You have given us a future. You have shown us what courage and compassion look like." The humans accepted the gifts silently. Their helmets reflected the light of the twin suns. They did not speak because words could not capture the weight of what had happened here. Instead, they simply nodded. The fleet began preparing for departure. Engines hummed softly as systems were checked. Humans packed supplies, secured equipment, and double-checked navigation. Outside, the aliens gathered to watch their visitors leave. Children waved. Adults stood silently, some with tears shimmering on their translucent skin. As the first Terran ship lifted off, a gentle wind carried the sound of applause and cheering. The humans in orbit looked down at the planet one last time. It was no longer a dying world. Life had returned slowly but surely. Cities glowed. Fields stretched toward the horizon. The air, once poisonous, had begun to smell faintly sweet again. For the Terrans, the journey home would be long. They would cross light years of empty space, return to Earth, and be greeted by a planet full of people watching, waiting, and hoping. But inside each human there was a quiet pride, not for themselves, but for what they had helped the aliens achieve. While the Terrans traveled, the alien world began sending messages to other species in the galaxy. They told stories of courage, compassion, and the beings from the blue planet who had walked into their storms and rebuilt hope. Over time, other civilizations began to reconsider their view of humanity. The stories traveled far and wide. Humans were no longer unpredictable, reckless survivors. They were helpers, teachers, and healers. The Galactic Council, which had once debated sending anyone at all, received the transmissions. Their chamber was quiet, filled with representatives from countless worlds. One elder spoke softly. They were right to let them go. We underestimated humanity. They have not only saved a world, but shown the galaxy what true courage looks like. The others nodded silently, some in awe, some in shame. For centuries, the Council had relied on power, technology, and strict control, and now they saw clearly that strength sometimes comes in quieter forms, in persistence, in patience, in risking oneself to help another. Back on Earth, the people waited for the Terran fleet to return. They watched every live feed, celebrated every update, and shared stories of the bravery shown by their fellow humans. When the ships finally entered the atmosphere, the planet erupted in cheers, lights, and banners. Families embraced returning crew members. Children ran along the landing platforms shouting words of welcome. And the returning humans, exhausted and covered in the dust of another world, smiled. They had not come back with treasures or trophies. They came back with knowledge, memories, and proof of something far greater. The ability of humans to change the fate of worlds. Not through force, but through heart. In the weeks and months that followed, the Terrans told their story to the people of Earth. Schools studied it. Governments celebrated it. Artists painted it. And the alien survivors, now fully recovered, sent messages of thanks and friendship, promising to visit Earth when travel became possible. The galaxy had learned something profound. Humans were no longer seen merely as survivors from a harsh world. They were teachers, friends, and bearers of hope. Their courage and compassion had restored life to a planet that had been forgotten by almost every other civilization. And for the humans themselves, the mission was a reminder of what they had always known. When someone cries out for help, you do not turn away. You answer. You endure. You act. And sometimes that simple choice can change not just a world, but the galaxy itself. As the twin suns of the alien world shone once more, the humans looked back at the planet from orbit. They could see children running freely, families rebuilding, and light returning to every corner. And deep inside, they felt a quiet satisfaction, the kind that comes from knowing they had done exactly what they were meant to do. The universe was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable. But somewhere far away, a little world had learned to live again, because humans had dared to care, and that, they knew, was more powerful than any weapon, any technology, or any law. The story ends here, with humanity's courage, compassion, and perseverance leaving a mark on a world far from Earth, and a lesson for the galaxy. Strength is measured not by might, but by heart.